Well, I appreciate Maddie and Devin and Belinda and Taylor and everybody that invited me to here tonight. I hope it's worth a few minutes of your time. I had a little PowerPoint, but we were having some technical difficulties, so we'll try to pull this off from memory. But let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm actually a graduate from BYU. I did my undergrad at BYU and my graduate at the U of U, but my heart is really here at UVU, believe it or not. 3 of my 4 kids, and soon to be 4 of my 4 kids, will have attended and graduated here at UVU. I love the experiential learning experience. My oldest boy, who's now married, and I have a grandbaby and another grandbaby due in about 6 weeks, which is the best, I just want you to know. So when your parents go a little gaga, I saw a little baby come in, was it Koa? What was the name?
Koa.
Koa. So, and what did that mean in, was it Australian name?
It means brave in Hawaiian.
Brave in Hawaiian, okay, so the table, you steered me wrong. You told me it was Australian. So anyways, but so being a grandparent's a great thing, as I'm sure your family's already found out. But I just love the hands-on nature and the service philosophy that exudes from here. And I'll share a couple of examples as I get into a little bit more about the volunteer opportunities that are available at the Coalition, of how UVU students have been heavily engaged already and made a big difference in what we do. Just real quickly, I want to embarrass Devin a little bit. So Devin grew up with, I grew up 2 doors down when my wife and I got married and we started our family. My oldest son was best friends with Devin, and at one point I even had to put a lock at the top of the door because my son would always open the door 10 o'clock at night and run down the street to Devin's to go play. And I won't tell you all the shenanigans that they got into, probably not leadership quality, but I do know that my next oldest boy, it wasn't Devin, but I know that there was some kind of a tiff in the neighborhood amongst these young boys, and my second boy, Mitchell, to the perpetrator in the neighborhood, went over and peed on his bike to get back on it. So those were the kinds of things that, sorry to tell off-color jokes to start off, but that's the kind of neighborhood that my son and Devin, but he's always been an outstanding young man and a great example to my son. I mentioned experiential learning. My oldest boy, I mentioned, graduated from here last year, and his professor loved him so much that he got him a job with a startup company that he was starting, and is still employed there and doing very well. So anyways, I want to tell you just a little bit about my experience. I'm kind of in a unique position. Believe it or not, I have been with the Food and Care Coalition for 30 years. I started out while I was in school, and as soon as I graduated from BYU, I was in the right place at the right time to take over the executive director position. The Food and Care Coalition was founded in the fall of 1988, and it was founded by really a group much like you. It was people in the community that after the deinstitutionalization movement, say that 10 times, after that happened in the late 70s, public policy shifted for those that were struggling with mental health from let's lock them up because that's what's best for society, and human rights advocates got involved and swung that pendulum. Unfortunately, sometimes, as we're wont to do in politics, we don't swing the pendulum to the middle where usually common sense resides, and we swung it all the way over to the other extreme. So now we have mentally ill people on the streets of our communities, and we are families, community advocates, agencies, and concerned citizens are almost powerless to do anything about it. You're expecting somebody that's mentally ill to make rational, logical decisions towards treatment. And so that's one of the challenges we face, one of the subpopulations that we see at the Food and Care Coalition. And I've come to love them dearly. I'll share one quick experience. that I learned probably about your age, and fortunately I learned it early on. I've always been kind of a tender-hearted person. Instead of a funny bone, I think I've always had a social justice bone. But when I was in my element, when I was at the Food and Care Coalition and serving, it was natural, it was easy. But one day, the first year after I had taken over as executive director, we had ran out of some food, or I think we'd ran out of milk for breakfast. And so I had to run down to the store, I think it was Smith's actually. And I went into the store, and one of our mentally ill gals that I had seen and talked to and hugged and interacted with saw me coming in the store, just lit up like a light bulb, and started running over and yelling my name really loud. And I'm ashamed to say that for just a moment, I was ashamed. And it wasn't that I was ashamed of her. I was worried about what other people thought. What would other people think if I associated with this young lady? And fortunately, I've got a real strong conscience. It pricked me really quickly. And as soon as the thought entered, I was already asking my Father in heaven for forgiveness for having that thought. But I was glad that I learned that lesson early on. And as a leader, one of the things that you are going to do, one of the great mantles that I think you're going to carry, is there's times when you have to step forward when nobody else will. You're going to have to step forward and be the example. You're going to have to step forward and do the right thing for the sake of just doing the right thing and not worrying about accolades or what other people think. So that's one experience. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and with the absence of the PowerPoint, having been there for 30 years, I've been in a unique position. I have seen probably 1.5 million hours of volunteer man-hours donated by our community. I've had probably the privilege to meet over 200,000 unique individuals that have come in and donated their time and their expertise to improve and polish what now is the Food and Care Coalition. I can tell you we weren't as pretty as we are today. We have how many of you have been down to the coalition before? Recently, just in the last few years, okay? What was your impression of the building when you came in? Just shout it out.
It's very put together.
Put together. Anything else?
It's clean, it's nice.
Clean, it's nice, okay? When you think of homeless, you usually think down by the railroad tracks. Ironically, that's where we're at. You think about warehouses. You think about it being worn down, torn down. One of our great benefactors, the Ashton family, over the years, I remember when Karen came down one time, she said, I drove by it probably 6 or 7 times thinking I was going to know where you were at, just because of my preconceived stereotypes. And so with our new facility, we had 3 goals. We wanted the individual coming into our facility to know that they were a person of substance, that they were a person of worth, that they were a person of value. And even though they don't always hear that, some of you may have heard over the last 5 years as the debates over homeless services and changing the model up in Salt Lake. Ironically, we don't get a lot of funding from Salt Lake, but they are fashioning their new resource centers and modeling them nearly after ours. And a lot of it was because when philanthropists came and when Chief of Police came and when the Better Business Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce and congressmen and senators came to our facility, they're like, wow, this is a nice facility. I don't see huge gatherings of people gathering around and camping next to your facility. or creating problems for your neighbors. Why is that? And it was about our service philosophy, but it starts with you're a person of worth and you're wanted in our community. Up in Draper, the mayor kind of took it on the chin last year. He talked about, it was maybe 2 years ago now, but he talked about the possibility of having one of the resource centers in Draper. And largely a middle income, upper income class of individuals that live in Draper, good people, religious people, would have tarred and feathered them right off the stage because of fear, because of ignorance. And so in my experience, I've been privileged to see the coalition evolve to what I think it always should have been. We had this vision for what we should have been a long time ago. It was just, we needed the community to catch that vision with us and to share that vision, and which they have done. Now let me just real quickly step back too and to kind of give you an idea. One of the things that, and I had this on a slide, but I don't know, this may seem a little off topic, but some of you may know of Dale Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. They were very wealthy tycoons. One was an industrialist and one was an oil tycoon. And they had phenomenal wealth. And I know a lot of people in our country complain about taxes, but we're actually one of the least taxed countries out of first world countries in the entire world. And partly it was because of these two men who shaped the tax code, and they're actually known today as kind of the modern day philanthropists. They were wealthy individuals that said, you know what, government should not be doing everything. The business sector can't absorb all of these tax burdens. So let's incentivize giving by creating a third sector, which is the nonprofit charitable sector. And so that's where my wheelhouse has been over the last 30 years. I root in the early days. I didn't want to do business because I was a little too idealistic, but I was like, I just don't want to go make money to make money for the sake of it. But I realized real quickly that I need to root for businesses because they're the ones that have discretionary income to give to charitable entities, to drive social causes and social justice, and to create change in our communities. And so when you think about, wealth, think about that opportunity that many people, and we've had a lot of benefactors. UVU is a benefactor from many individuals like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies that have stepped forward to create a learning environment that I think is second to none. And then lastly, I want to tell you about why I got into what I did. My grandfather was my hero. My grandfather, Jack Crane, grew up in a small town in Bear Lake, Idaho, a little town called Bennington. And if you've ever driven to maybe the Tetons or Star Valley, you have to go through Bear Lake and Montpelier to get there through Afton. Just 4 miles north of Montpelier, which is where our high school was, I grew up in a little 400-person community. My grandfather was known from the north end of the valley to the south end of the valley. And it was because he built sawhorses. It was because he went and broke horses. It's when somebody was sick or ill or injured, he would go help them farm. My grandpa spent every waking moment not in front of a TV watching a football game. On his free time, mostly he was out serving the community. And he taught me at a very young age that he said, Brent, if you want a good life, you've got to give your life away. And I will forever be grateful and indebted to my grandfather for that example. And I can tell from the group, the fact that you're part of this academy and this leadership group tells me that you've either got that spirit within you yourself or you've seen it in somebody else and that's inspired you to get involved. And then lastly, I want to tell you about the impact of people and what you can do. So on screen here, we've actually changed his story. You can actually go to our website. This is actually the website. And you can read a little bit about Mark. Mark, 3 years ago, was living between two cement barriers in Spanish Fork. He could not walk. He was wheelchair bound. It was cold. It was winter. He had no place to stay. There was a lady in the community that would go and stop. She saw him, and she would stop by one of the fast food restaurants and buy him a meal a couple times a week. And then a good friend of mine that works for one of the housing authorities here ran into it and became aware of the situation and knew of our facility and said, hey, Brent, could you guys take him into your new transitional housing program? And he wasn't the perfect fit based on our criteria. We were really worried about if it was too much. He didn't even know his name. That's how far down the rabbit hole Mark was. And we took the chance. We brought him in. And one of the outreach workers with the Mental Health Authority, our facility is quite unique. It's very collaborative. We have our agency, we have the Mental Health Authority, we have Mapleton's Community Health Center, and then we also have a dental clinic run by another charitable group called Share a Smile. And then we've got about 15 other agency programs that do outreach, like the VA and DWS and many others that come to our facility and do outreach directly to our clients right in the environment that they feel comfortable in. But Mark didn't know his name. He couldn't walk. He came in. It took about 3 weeks before he would say much of anything. One of my employees, his daughter was really into yoga, and she said, hey, I'd like to come in and do some yoga classes. Mark was the only client that attended every week. He lived at our facility for 14 months. He was the longest tenured client we've ever had in our facility. Most others transition a little more quickly. But when he left, as you can see here, he was walking with the help of a cane. This is Mark. He lives in Springville. He has his own apartment. In fact, he came in today, and I teased him. I said, hey, you going for the Jerry Garcia look? And he looked at me and kind of giggled. He's got a full-on beard. But he is a sweet, gentle, kind human being that, without the action of people, would either still be on the streets or not be alive today. And it wasn't the Food and Care Coalition. It was people coalescing support and concern around a human being. And so I know that Elizabeth Smart, okay, it's not all, we don't encourage people to just go pick up somebody that's homeless and take them home. Elizabeth's dad he was in our facility just a few weeks ago. In fact, it was right before one of their perpetrators was released from prison. She was struggling with that. But the coalition is important because it provides a vehicle for the community to get involved. And there's other things. So if there's anything that you take away from here, it's not that it come down to the Food and Care Coalition. There's lots of opportunities, but we're inundated with people calling us all the time. When it comes to the holidays, we probably had to turn away 3 out of 4 requests because we didn't have that number of opportunities. But we have about 7,500 unique individuals that come in every year, donating about 50,000 volunteer hours a year. Teaching classes, we had a UVU group that did some research on value-based living. We've had just yesterday UVU students from your dental hygiene school that came in and were doing their labors there in our facility, blessing our clients. So there's lots of opportunities. If you go to the website, you'll see some. Morgan is our volunteer coordinator. You can always just email him at volunteer@foodandcare.org, and I'll leave that with your group. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's not important what you do. It's just get involved. That's what my grandpa taught me. He said, get involved, and if you do, good will follow you the rest of your days of your life. And my life has been enriched and blessed in countless measures. I have received far more than I've ever given. But it's been a labor of love for me, and it's one that I've enjoyed completely with my heart, and I've shared it with my family, and I share this with the community. And so God bless. Go out there and do the work outside of the box, find something that you're passionate about, that you want to do, and don't let people tell you no. If you believe it and in your heart you know it's right, go do it. And I leave that with you. Thank you very much.